So this whole project started for me in the Goodwood office, actually. We were talking about cars that we should get for the St Mary's Trophy, the famous saloon car race. So one of my colleagues, Matt Hearn, said, we should get a Chevrolet Impala. Why would we want an Impala? No one's ever raced an Impala. He said, well, Dan Gurney did. So I thought, well, okay, obviously at Goodwood, everyone knows a lot about cars. So I didn't want to say, I've never heard of that. So I did a bit of Googling and I started to uncover this incredible story of Dan Gurney and his Impala. And basically in late 1960, he was watching the British Saloon Car Championship and watching all these 3.8 Jags winning all the races. And he thought, if I bought a stock Chevrolet Impala, I could go over and beat them. So that's exactly what he did. He ordered one of the very, very early 61 Impalas, and it was one of the first ones off the production line. And he took the engine, and Bill Fowler did a few mods on the engine, but nothing really, just check clearances. He put a Corvette sway bar on the back and a bit of brake cooling, and that was it. And he shipped it over to the UK, and for the international trophy race at Silverstone, he entered it for that. And first practice, he was kind of mid-grid, and come the second practice, he was almost 2 seconds a lap quicker than everyone else.
Centre of interest in the production car race was number 37, the Chevrolet Impala, flown specially from America by Dan Gurney.
So I think all the British teams were probably quite stressed at the thought of this kind of American monster, because what you've got to remember is that this is pre-Ford Galaxy, so this was kind of the big American muscle car. This is one of the first ones that came over and raced in the British Saloon Car Championship. And come the race, he started on pole, led every lap, bar the last two, when that wheel right there came off. And there's this really cool photo of Dan walking around the front of the car and looking at this wheel that was just completely caved in at the back. And so he ordered NASCAR wheels, and he then wanted to enter the July round at Silverstone.
For many years now, the Jaguars have won this race, but this year the Impala has lapped in practice faster than the Jaguars, and Lofty England, the racing manager of Jaguars, is reported to have bitten his fingernails down to his elbows.
Well, by that time, the British teams have all sort of got together, and Lofty England running the Jaguars, and they decided what they didn't really want in their championship was this big American muscle car that still had a radio, still had bench seats. The only thing I think it didn't have was air conditioning, coming over and beating them. So suddenly the homologation papers were lost, and he actually turned up for the next round at Silverstone, but just couldn't get, and he was on the phone to Paris to try and get all the papers sorted, and mysteriously it just couldn't work. So he wrote a very angry letter to Autosport complaining about this sort of British teaming up against him. And many years later he was actually asked, why didn't you try and sort of fight the decision? And his reply was just, why fight City Hall? Which I thought was quite good. Anyway, he then sold the car to a friend of his who shipped it to Australia where he lived. It was converted to right-hand drive, and he did a little bit of racing, but then it was used as a tow car, towing other race cars. And then the history of it, then it sort of disappeared. The original engine was taken out, and it ran a sort of much smaller engine, and that was where the story stopped. So I thought this would be a really cool car to have at Goodwood, and I thought someone would have it and would be running it as a racer, but actually I finally tracked it down to America, and a guy who was selling it on behalf of the Australian owner. And at that time, actually, Dan was still alive, and I was kind of really excited about telling him that I'd found his Impala and was going to kind of revive it and get it back to Goodwood and back to the UK. And it took quite a long time to sort of agree a deal, and also to work out exactly what shape the car was in. So I didn't even fly over to America because there was no point in me looking at the car. I'm not a Chevrolet Impala expert. I know a bit more now, the number of parts I've had to order. So a really, really friendly bunch of guys, really helpful over in the States. One of them went to go and look at it, took loads of video, and confirmed the sort of the condition and the fact that it had the modifications on it that Dan Gurney did in period. And so eventually the deal was done, but very sadly Dan had passed away only a couple of weeks before I'd finally sort of got the car. So I have actually since been in touch with Alex, his son, and one of the things I'd love to do is get Alex in the car and get a Gurney back in the car again. So we'll do that one day, but it was really nice actually. Alex sent me this really lovely email saying how much his dad loved the car and loved racing and beating the Jags. And apparently even 50 plus years later, the wheel braking still annoyed him, which I love. It's such a, a racer's view. 50 years, not long enough to to forget, is it? So I first saw it, I think about 3 or 4 months after I bought it. And it was here at Jordan Racing Team, and it turned up on kind of a completely nondescript trailer. And so there's actually quite a nice photo of me looking in, seeing it for the first time. So it's amazing to finally have it back here.